After all this, you still...
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
We're hitting the target of like 100 episodes pretty well. It's like that's this year, but
oh yeah, we're getting pretty close.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like this year in context, like from January to today, and it's like a slow escalation of things getting worse, but it's been more like stochastic bursts of like. At least that's been my read of this year, if it makes any sense. Maybe that's history as a whole. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of get that sense where it's just kind of like it's like these like decent stretches of kind of not exactly nothing, but you know, at least stuff where like okay, like there's not a whole lot going on, or there's not a whole lot like getting worse, and then like some weeks it's just like boom, here's like a bunch of events happening all at once, and I think that's kind of the theme of this episode in a lot of ways, right? I mean, this is recapping probably almost a month's worth of stuff in some cases. Some stuff's a little bit closer than others, but
yeah, because even this year, like if we had a month gap in between like current affairs coverage or like anything devastating, and it's not like we've been slacking on the uploads either. Like this is only like a week and change last release, you know, and so much has happened.
For sure.
Oh boy. Well, welcome back to the Greenhouse, dear listeners. I'm here with Josh today for a long-awaited, long-overdue current affairs recap. I cannot stress any more than I already can that this has been a hell of events lately. It's been crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of all over the place, right? I mean, a lot of kind of foreign affair related things. We've talked about Israel, Gaza before. Needless to say, that has not improved in the slightest. You have this kind of, it felt a little under the radar, but you have the Chinese summit. The U.S.-Chinese summit. We've got all kinds of there's some election updates and a super off-year election, and just congressional nonsense all around.
Yeah, and I'll do our track with this, but all of this happened concurrently, and I would basically you can't stress just how much how the conflict is playing out in Gaza is touching up on all these other events, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, and it's kind of crazy too, where like some of these events they feel very much like they kind of occur in isolation of one another too.
Yeah. And just with everything popping up this month, I mean, you had that initial shift of, public possibly U.S. interest on Ukraine, moving to focus on Gaza and Israel. And while I'm also not well versed, I did just want to mention that the conflict also in like Sudan, Congo, the Tigray region, and to put it bluntly, it has not been the vibe has been off globally. If such a statement can be made about world affairs, the vibe is off.
I mean, to be fair, and I mean maybe this is kind of just an area where I think we're both a little ignorant. I feel like the vibe's like always off in global affairs. You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of It's never in a great state. I mean, like obviously our coverage and like kind of our knowledge base as a whole is sort of a little U.S. biased, and I'm not like trying to like I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, I don't think people are expecting that, but like it's the stuff in Sudan has been happening for a long time, right? And it's something that I barely have any awareness of, right? It's like that's just kind of the nature of the beast there. But
same with the Congo as well. Like this is maybe one episode in a long and sordid history.
Well, I mean, the Congo especially, right? I mean, like
and even to a larger extent, what's going on in Gaza. Only a new episode in what has been tragic events since like the 50s onwards. So
yeah, and like that at least kind of comes in and out of like U.S. media attention a little bit more. Here we are kind of on the like hey, it's and everyone's it's in everyone's face, it's in the news and all that stuff now. And I was talking about this a bit with my students, where like we were talking about it's. And I think it's a relevant thing for like this particular episode as a whole, but there's this notion of like sort of this what we call the two presidencies thesis, which is the idea that like presidents have a lot more unilateral authority when it comes to foreign policy, because there's just less salience among the public for like members of Congress to really kind of capture on it. And of course, you compare that with like the notion of like the imperial presidency and just sort of the imperial apparatus as a whole. And like, while they do have a little bit more ability to ignore Congress, they don't exactly have like just, all the flexibility in the world to sort of do whatever they want. And I think that there's definitely the sense that we've seen where I think like the leader of the United States is kind of always captured by some of these imperial apparatuses. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing now when it comes to Israel and Gaza. And I think that there's like a few other things as well that sort of kind of come into that as well, as far as our discussion of today's events.
Yeah. Further reading on what Josh just brought up, right? We plugged this book on the podcast before, Spencer Ackerman's Reign of Terror.
Yeah.
Which is a great introductory, and we doing a bit of a deep dive on like the post 9/11 imperial apparatus built around the executive branch came to be, and how it operates in secrecy and without a lot of oversight. It's a great book on that subject. It doesn't delve into like some of the weird or like unorthodox QAnon type shit,
Yeah. Real quick, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Your audio is cutting out occasionally.
Oh boy.
Yeah, like
where
right
did it cut
there.
out last?
Like it's just like small snippets, but I know like that's the kind of thing that like gets you like annoyed when it comes to like editing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to resolve for that.
Okay. I should know if you had like a usual go-to fix.
The go-to would be like basically snip every loose bit of audio back together and hope it comes back. Let's get the backup bot in here. What do you mean you don't have permission? Okay. We're just gonna have to roll with the punches on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I said it's not too bad. I just figured I'd let you know. And if there was something that you could immediately fix it with, but if not, it is what it is.
It might be my network too. Okay.
I mean it's very brief and very little, so I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, that's a limitation of the technology. For the listeners, if there are audio issues, I'm sorry. I'll do my best to fix it, but I think it should be okay. So let's see what was the last thing we mentioned?
Reign of Terror.
Yeah, Reign of Terror is the book. Yeah, I would just say check out Spencer Ackerman's Reign of Terror. It's a great read on the subject. Also, just a lot of developments this week too. I think we would be remiss not to bring up. There was a protest outside of the DNC demanding, for a ceasefire in Gaza. That was really violent up by the police, and it just reminded a lot of observers of like the '68 Democratic Convention.
Yeah, that's the immediate go-to comparison, right? Just the circumstances, kind of the nature of the protests too. They all sort of fit within that. I mean, obviously, I don't want the same outcomes from that, right? I mean, that I don't think accomplished anything productive, unfortunately, for anyone involved. And this, I don't know, it's like one of those things that's frustrating, right? We've sort of talked, we alluded to, right, the idea that, we've sort of retriangulated a little bit of attention from Ukraine onto Israel, and I don't really understand it, other than like, I mean, yeah, I get like Israel's our ally, blah, blah, blah. It's important to our foreign relations interests, et cetera, et cetera. But I was looking at I was like, okay, like with the amount of money that they want to dump into Israel, I'm like, well, how much of this is just like what we would normally be giving them every year, right? And I looked that up, and apparently, on average, we usually give them like roughly $3 to $4 billion a year. So this is like 3 to 4 times that. And I feel like there was little so much of the political apparatus is just on autopilot in the United States for it, right? Like in Biden's speech, when he's talking about it, he's just like, oh, it's Israel. Of course we gotta help them out. Whereas like Ukraine, it's like you have to like I don't know why you have to like sell it. Like, oh, we're you really have to go for that hard sell when it's like, well, like the conflicts are almost in reverse, right? Where it's like Ukraine, it's like we're sort of helping these underdogs sort of fight back against an invasion, and in Israel Gaza we're sort of helping the empire encroach on stuff like that. And it's like I don't know how much resources they need to if and obviously we know like there's been a ton of war crimes committed, and even there was this kind of in one of Biden's addresses this week there was a little bit of a Freudian slip where he'd said the first war crimes were committed by Hamas in this situation, which sort of acknowledges that Israel is committing war crimes in retaliation. But I think like the thing that's frustrating for us, right, is it's like terrorist groups are kind of they're obviously by default like they're the bad guys, right? But there's no sense in protesting terrorism because they're not it's a power structure that's not responsive to that. Whereas, trying to sort of protest for, creating the people who have more institutional power, trying to restrict their, worst impulses is being met with a lot of hostility. And on some level too, it's kind of politics making for strange bedfellows a little bit, where I think some people who are sort of taking advantage of this situation to sort of just, oh, hey, Israel, it's the Jewish state. Let's just, bring back anti-Semitism. Let's bring that back fully in vogue. And let's face it, that hasn't really gone away. But it's definitely gotten worse. And I think, you see stuff like Elon Musk where it's like, oh, well, he said that, this thing that was sort of pro-Palestinian. But then you see all of these other tweets that he's responding to that are just full on Jewish world order, anti-Semitic conspiracies and it's this is where I think you have to be vigilant about what your movement looks like and who it welcomes. And I don't think anyone's necessarily welcoming Elon into the movement, but it's it's a lot of just kind of like you said before, right? Everyone has to have a take, and sometimes those takes are just based on whatever your preconceived notions are, your vibes.
Yeah, I think the way you put it, that the American pilot with this, right? The situation from October 7th onwards is incredible, but the American response of doubling down support for Israel, despite what seem to be very clear missteps from Israel that are even a bit much for the United States' taste, even for the public's taste for that matter, right? And still doubling down on funding, doubling down, even as people on the on Israel side are starting to complain that attempts made at Hasbara or at defending Israel's ability to retaliate asymmetrically are they're complaining that the propaganda or the public PR machine they're trying to run isn't working on the public. And I think it's great that a very moderate and sane call for ceasefire, I don't know how a ceasefire became the radical option, is the popular option, right? But even that is not being taken by the system as such, and calling for a ceasefire would be in the United States' best interest. I would but something about the contours of this discussion, right, is it's the in the room of this whole thing, which is that foreign policy ultimately remains the least accountable. You know, how do I say this? It was one of those levers of the American state the public has no ability or authority to pull, right? So even
And also, let's
go ahead.
face it, minimal interest too.
Yeah. Basically. So for those who are interested and who want to take action, you know, it's basically like and pleading with people with the institutional authority to handle it, right? And it's not kicking off. But something too with like the discussion and discourse surrounding this, because that's really all there is right now. I'm not maligning anyone who's, you know, demonstrated or made their voice heard or, you know, done what they can to send aid or demand a ceasefire, right? Because, you know, sometimes all we can do is make our moral position heard, even if there's not much we can do. And that still matters, right? But fundamentally, all that's left now is the discourse, you know, watching in horror as these things happen and hoping that someone can do something about it, right? And as you're mentioning, and as we're starting to see, right, is that in certain spheres, you're starting to see the development of people examining that, you know, the relationship between the United States and Israel is one that isn't, you know, of an imperial power and its comprador state or its partner abroad. People are seeing that anti-Semitism was not stopped by the creation of a Jewish state, nor was the original Zionist project, you know, ever intended to stop anti-Semitism, or even more broadly that, you know, Christian Zionism exists as its own separate anti-Semitic force, even if it supports the creation of a, you know, of a Jewish state.
I mean, and we've seen great examples of this recently. You have a lot of like pretty anti-Semitic people, Richard Spencer and all these people that are like talking at like APAC conferences and stuff like that.
Right.
Because like, you know, their support for, you know, Jewish people is met by and is, you know, capped at supporting Israel. That's all it is, right? And you have a lot of these people who are, you know, you have these like anti-Semitic Zionists, as you said. I mean, I don't necessarily think that the creation of the Jewish state was necessarily intended to stop anti-Semitism. I think it was just a place that they would, in theory, be safe from it. But it's, you know, it doesn't change the fact that now it's used as this tool to promote it in a lot of cases, right? You know, APAC, you know, we talked about this a little bit. It must have been last year, right? With the Stevens Levin race, where like,
yeah,
you know, he was a Jewish member of Congress. APAC opposed him. And then they claimed, you know, then conveniently they claimed they're not a Jewish organization. Now they, of course, claim they are, because that's, you know, it's just how these people sort of play that game. And it's just what can we do to maximize, you know, the leverage of our support from different people? Like what hat is the best to wear for that? And which one can we wear to, you know, toss it to the side to, you know, get away from certain accountability?
Seeing like cynical and also honest invocations of the culture war and identity politics.
Yeah.
To differing and somewhat monstrous degrees depending on who's involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like I had hoped that in the silver lining course people would start to see, you know, the contradictions of the culture war, its inherent falsehoods, you know, and people could maybe formulate a more holistic vision of how power operates. But I think the other shoe is starting to drop in certain aspects. I don't think that, you know, rank and file anti-Semitism is going to ruin anything yet. But I think it will muddy the waters enough for people to maybe stop having an interest or stop paying attention or try to get the fuck out of there before they get it. You know what I'm saying? The shit coding aspect.
Yeah.
Like I am worried about that to some extent, but at this to know that a good majority of the public wants a majority of the public is starting to question if violence is the answer to everything. It's and it's also something positive, even if it's minimal.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
But it's again, it is one of those things where it's like the relationship of the United States and Israel, the plight of the Palestinian people, and how politics have played out in that region remain complex and mercy of several complexities that, as you mentioned, the average person doesn't know and may not even. So how do you deal with that? Not just in the context of this issue, but of everything. That remains the question.
Yeah, for sure. And like the thing is, yeah, I was gonna say the thing is too. It's like it's not just like the U.S. I mean, the U.S. is obviously we have our domestic bias that sort of puts the U.S. in like a a driver's seat position here. But it's like Israel has support from many international actors, including even China. Right? China gives them a ton of money and resources too. And
even the increased cooperation with like Egypt and Saudi Arabia, although we don't know how that's going to play out regionally, right? Like,
right. Well, and they're right. That's sort of that's something that people are speculating might erode as a result of all of this, which again has major consequences for the region. Right. So like there's this is we're seeing kind of a lot of frankly unspeakable tragedies being invoked just within this current conflict, but the aftermath could be absolutely disastrous if things aren't kept in check.
Exactly. On the subject of developments this week as well, this kind of took me by surprise. Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping are meeting in Washington. What exactly is it? Just a summit in general, or do they have like specific goals they're trying to address here?
So I don't necessarily know if these were like all like specific goals they did, but some of the things that have been accomplished here include sort of an agreement to kind of like military normalization. I can't remember the exact term for it. But kind of like sort of sharing secrets again, sort of in a cooperative posture and whatnot, and also cracking down on like fentanyl production, which has been kind of like this major topic of concern with U.S. and Chinese relations, right? Where it's come up every single GOP debate, which we'll get into that later and some of the other details. But the idea that and it is a crisis, right? Where we do have a lot of people that are being killed by that. And it's, this sort of agreement to sort of fight the production of it together and stuff like that. It generally seemed to be a really positive meeting. There was some jokes were made about this, but there was apparently one brief incident where Biden had like been friendly with Xi Jinping's wife and like wished her a happy birthday because he, shares a birthday with her. So that's how he knew.
Yeah.
Xi Jinping was apparently embarrassed because he had forgotten that his wife's birthday was that week.
Yeah, that's definitely I was working way too hard moment. He tried to play it off as that was
yeah. Doesn't work for everyone, G.
That's more of that classic Biden Irish trickery at work here.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's the most Biden moment you could like imagine, right? It's that specific thing.
It's like he managed to remember the one thing. That's classic.
Yeah.
Oh my god. A couple other moments from this conference too. Folks are noticing Tony Blinken really sweating, just sweating a lot lately. And there was one moment where a reporter asked, "Do you consider Xi to be
This was
a
after
dictator?"
the summit. To be clear.
This was after the summit, and Biden's like, "No, I still consider him to be a dictator." And you have like,
oh, he's just shaking his head.
Yeah, Blinken just shaking his head, sweating, and I'm just like, buddy, like, I mean, I don't know what to say about Tony Blinken more broadly, but there's a lot that happened under his watch that like he should really be kicking himself in the pants for. And I think like, you know, I don't say this lightly, but for him to be like a former CIA like official jumping to Department of State, overseeing this conflict in Ukraine, the escalation of conflicts in Gaza, and just a whole host of these affairs while being unable to, you know, exert some kind of moderating influence on Biden in these kind of hot mic. You know, this isn't Biden's first hot mic moment, right? This is actually him answering.
That's not a hot mic moment. I mean, it's.
I mean, that was his direct answer. Yeah.
And it's, you know, and it's like one of those things. I think he didn't want him to answer it because, like, it's kind of like, I mean, calling someone who you're trying to, you know, start to, you know, normalize relations with or sort of become buddy with, calling them a dictator, not, you know, necessarily the best approach to it, but like, I mean, it's, you know, it's kind of, you know.
I mean, I'm
true.
definitely
like
the one thing I will say is like I liked the slow boiling of like the Cold War with China that certain people had been baying for. I think even if somewhat tepid, like puts a halt to some of that, which is always a positive. But you know, Tony B, this is on you. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Like,
I mean, he hasn't been around long enough to really blame for this. If we're honest,
I mean, again, it's just in terms of like Biden cabinet secretaries who've been taking L's. This really takes the heat off of Buttigieg.
Sure, that's fair. Notably, I was actually working out during some of the coverage of the summit, and I saw Fox's coverage on one of the other windows. And
oh my gosh!
God, and I wasn't listening too much to it, right? But like, you know, you just see like the pictures, and on Hannity, he's got the axis of evil with Putin, Xi Jinping, and the Iranian Ayatollah. It's like, God, we're like one resurrecting that phrase, right? The axis of evil, straight from the War on Terror. We've also, you know, recast the members a bit, but it's just like, it's insane, right? I mean, like the saber rattling against China is just so unproductive, right? Like you have no like I don't understand what they envision the end goal is. I mean, I guess the end goal would be domination, but like, how do they envision us getting there or whatever? And how do they envision that actually playing out, right? Because we are, you know, in sort of this state of like co-economic dependence that I think really prevents any like, I mean, I could be wrong, but I mean, I think, you know, the evidence largely pans out, right? That kind of prevents any like really serious aggression between us, right? Is that we can't like, you know, because we are sort of economically codependent on one another, it would be foolish to go into, you know, to let that dissolve.
Precisely. And it's like, I think it's the ahistorical character of the right winger now as a culture warrior, rather than, you know, not that I want Cold Warriors to ever come back, you know, that's just it's the most insufferable bunch, right? But the culture warrior right winger, right, has no historical memory of a goddamn thing. And, you know, they seem to conveniently forget, you know, the golden parachute deal between, you know, Deng Xiaoping and Richard Nixon. They always manage to conveniently forget that. And it's like, come on, no one told us to sell our manufacturing. We did that of our own accord, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How do you reckon with that? Well, blame the gays. What's new?
Yeah, I mean, who else are you going to blame, right? I mean, is that our transition to Santos?
Yes. So there is an update on Santos Watch. I forgot to add that to the.
I was like, you know, just the gays. I was like, wait a minute, like, Santos.
I don't know if you should blame the gays, but there's one gay you can blame.
I mean, so the ethics committee has, I don't know if they concluded or if they just published more of their findings on him. And it's bad. I mean, it's everything out of him is bad, right? It's just like he's a walking, like, just vessel of lies. during the speakership debacle, he was sort of like, posting like sort of trollish memes about like, oh, he should be the speaker, blah, blah, blah. But then we have, where is it?
I got it right here.
Oh, there we go. Would you like to read it?
Sure. So this is from a report from the Ethics Committee of the House. On October 21st, 2022, Redstone's bank account received a $25,000 wire from an account affiliated with someone named Contributor 2 for the report. From there, $25,000 was transferred from their account to Representative Santos's personal checking accounts.
To be clear, when they're referring to the Redstone account, I don't know if that's like the name of his campaign, but that's what it is. It's his campaign account. So different from his own account. So, transferring money from there to his personal account, not on the level.
So basically, after about $50,000 or so from Redstone was deposited into Representative Santos's personal accounts, the funds were used to, among other things, pay down personal credit card bills and other debt, make a $4,127.80 purchase at Hermes, and for smaller purchases at OnlyFans, Sephora, and for meals and parking.
I'm glad they specified smaller purchases at OnlyFans, that he wasn't spending $4,000 on OnlyFans.
I'm like, $4,000 at Hermes. They didn't even tell us what he bought, which I'm like, if there's $4,000 in campaign funds, I want to see the receipt. I want to see the items bought. But then like for OnlyFans, that's hilarious. That's like the fact that not only is George Santos just this all-time scammer figure, he did it all on like a credit card. That's amazing. He just left the trail and was like really expecting nobody to look.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, this is like a relatively, this is a really poorly concealed trail of misdeeds. And yeah, it's just wild. And like, I don't know. This is like, I mean, I don't think there's ever been a member of Congress who was like exposed as being this corrupt this early in his career. Like, this dude's not even a full term in yet.
Yeah, he's barely even a year in. Okay, this is his by the way, his Twitter is amazing. Just posting deep fried memes of himself, but he really posts on Twitter like it's, like your messy cousin on Facebook.
I loved his one meme where it was like, they're not after me, they're after you, and I'm just in the way or whatever. It was just like, there's no way he actually believes this, but like, maybe he does. I don't know.
Well, so this post is just making me laugh.
My year from hell.
My year from hell. Running for office was never a dream or goal, but when the opportunity to do so came, I felt the time to serve my country was now. Looking back today, I know one thing. Politics is indeed dirty from the very bottom up. Consultants, operatives, the opposition, the party, and more. The one thing I never knew was that the process in Congress was dirty. No shit, Sherlock. I will continue to fight for what I believe in and never back down. What the quote-unquote ethics committee did today was not part of due process. What they did was poison the jury pool on my ongoing... the typos are killing me here. Ongoing investigation with the DOJ. This was a dirty, biased act and one that tramples all over my rights. Press conference November 30th at 8 a.m. on the Capitol steps. I encourage all members of the press to attend. Happy Thanksgiving. Now, to be clear, this was the 16th. There is like 13. Why do you need 13 days or 14 days to prep?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of wild. Like, just like, I'm going to schedule for the 30th. Like everyone else, like, like Gates would, like, for all of the stuff he's done with like destroying McCarthy's speakership and everything, he would be like press conference on the Capitol steps in 10 minutes. Right? It's like, just like, I'm going to be there. The press is going to be there. It's going to be great. Where Santos, like, it's just, he's so bad at this. He's just so bad.
Oh my God.
I kind of like, I mean, if he was using donor dollars to like sub to like OnlyFans accounts, I really want to know, like, just what was the amount, right? Like, how much did he just?
Yeah, don't tell me the accounts, but how much?
I mean, I'm admittedly somewhat curious. I think I have a very different taste than him, but I mean, wouldn't it be something if it's just like, completely outs himself as, again, not being gay after all or something?
That would be the biggest scandal in all of this. That would be... Oh no.
We're just like sleepwalking into scandals with this guy at this point.
That's why, like, I kind of want to make like a betting pool for like next discovery in the Santos scandals. And like everyone's gonna lose money on those bets because it just takes a turn where it's like, I guess when you think about it, it's not a new scam, but it's like how brazenly brash and stupid some of it was is kind of unnerving, like there's a lot of members of Congress who have taken bribes, who have
we've got that big Menendez one, right? Which was probably, like, frankly, the Menendez crimes were probably a lot worse, frankly, with like just the amount of bribes that he took and the fact that it probably did influence policy. But this is just, as I said, it's just so like that took years to expose. This was just like, oh yeah, like I'm corrupt.
Even in the Menendez stuff, like it was kind of funny that he's in a group chat with the Egyptian officials in question.
Sure, yeah.
And just like, can you send more money? Thumbs up emoji. Crazy how that plays out.
Well, except he's being like paid in like gold bars and whatnot.
I'm gonna tell you one thing. You're the senator from New Jersey.
Yeah.
And you don't commit a little bit of corruption.
Yeah, like, I mean,
you don't take one bribe.
Now, when does it come out for Cory Booker?
Cory Booker, with Cory Booker,
I still loved his response to that, where apparently that report that at a lunch he's like, "You gotta love the sinner but hate the sin," or something like that. And everyone was just refuse to. Just picturing him saying that is like just too much for me.
There's everything about him where it's just like, I get that, like, if an electoral machine wants to get you the position, it can happen. But never before has like somebody been so like uncharacteristic of the state they represent. And that's saying a lot of the, congressional makeup, right? That's saying a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the senator from New Jersey has to be Tony Soprano. But like, it's just. I think
that's
like,
what you're saying, though.
I did not say it, but yeah, with Cory Booker, it's just like, I don't know. It's like, how like with Tim Scott, and we're gonna get into this. It's like everyone was accusing Tim Scott of being in the closet. With Cory Booker, it's even more egregious. I'm sorry, it's so much.
I don't know, dude. I mean, Tim Scott like made up a girlfriend so that his donors wouldn't leave him.
Yeah,
and he's like, and like his approach was literally like she goes to a different school, you wouldn't know her. That was basically how his exact approach to like, which is just crazy. Like, that's the best you can do. Like surely you could have found someone that would have been like, oh yeah, I'll pretend to like, date a presidential candidate. Like,
It don't add up. At least in Cory Booker's case, you're with Rosario Dawson, who's like was with Rosario Dawson, Smoke Show. After that doesn't pan out, you're with Eric Andre?
What?
Yeah, Rosario Dawson was there with Eric Andre. It's crazy. Like, yeah.
Weird.
I think after Cory Booker too, if I understand correctly.
Well, I mean,
a swing in the other direction after that.
Yeah, it's like you go from one side of the spectrum to the other.
Oh god. I guess jumping away from Santos Watch for a minute, because there's no telling what's next. We did just come out of midterm elections and the House finally being somewhat decided, but it still seems to be somewhat touch and go. We have Gooner Dad as the Speaker of the House, as I understand correctly.
So Yeah, so after we had, let's see, obviously McCarthy was voted out. Scalise was nominated by the party, but didn't feel he had enough votes to win on the floor, so he opted to not run. Um, Shocking, right? Jim Jordan ran, lost 3 votes before they did another secret ballot with the party, in which case they voted to remove him as their candidate. Steve Scalise was kind of stunk because of his I'm like David Duke without the baggage statement. But like, let's face it, right? Like that's kind of like there's no way any of them cared about that, like legitimately, especially if like those same people were like, yeah, Jim Jordan's our guy. Jim Jordan, as I said, failed on the floor 3 times. Mostly moderates sank him because electing him would have been career suicide for them. Then that takes us to Emer. Emer won the party's nomination, but he has, a very pesky record, which includes voting to solidify gay marriage, among other things.
Can't have that. Can't have that.
That's unacceptable. He should probably just kill himself. That's not in all seriousness, but for that party probably. Anyways, so he did that. He realized 3 hours later he would never pass on the floor, so he doesn't run. Then the party nominates Mike Johnson, this kind of fascist guy who is just kind of weird person. He went to the is it the Paul M. Hebert Law Center? He went to he worked with one place that was like named after someone who was, I don't know if it's the Paul Hebert one or if it's a different one, but it was named after like one of those other like Christian pedophiles.
Oh God.
Anyway, so he's got like this weird history. He won unanimously. Everyone backed him. He's probably more conservative than Jordan, but like was more unknown. But immediately, the minute he became the nominee and the speaker, everything drops about this guy. All of this opposition research just exposes like how conservative he is. A few days after this, we get this story that you alluded to with the Goomer thing, where he and his son are using, God, what is the app?
Covenant Eyes. Covenant Eyes. That's like the
Covenant Eyes.
It's like a stop off app, but like with a Christian focus on it.
Yes, and
so the way he explained it in an interview was even more fucked up. He made his son his accountability partner.
Yes, and he can testify that his son has a clean slate of his porn. He's like, occasionally, like he would get notifications about some stuff, and he mentions in that interview, he's like, he saw a picture of like 2 blurred like girls, and he's like, oh, and he like clicked it, and he was like, oh, it's just like 2 like librarians or something. Which like, hey, that doesn't mean it wasn't pornographic. Let me tell you something. But
isn't that what Ted Cruz liked on Twitter?
What was that?
Remember Cruz got caught liking porn on Twitter, and it was like the librarian video?
Yeah, it was like mostly like, I think it was like mostly like MILFs and shit. So yeah, that would check out. But yeah, so like this came out, and like I said, like it wasn't like that. This was like, oh, this was hidden details that he did this. This was from a public interview he had just conducted years ago as like a perpetual nobody. The other thing about him as well that's kind of worth talking about is he was one of the lead litigators of the sort of quote unquote legalized efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Basically, he was, it was the effort to overturn the election results in Michigan. I want to say Georgia, Arizona, yeah. And was it Louisiana? Was that the last one? No, he's from Louisiana.
Let's see.
No, maybe it still was.
Pennsylvania, Georgia,
Pennsylvania,
Michigan, Washington, Nevada, and New Mexico, and DC.
Wisconsin, not Washington. Oh, it wasn't a lot. And Washington D.C. How would you? Yeah, it's Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. So these were like swing states that were relatively close. So that was why they were the main targets.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, to top it off, like everything I've read about this guy, like prior to this, and just some of the stuff that's come out about him being Gooner Dad, he just seems like the classic like Bush era sex prevert kind of conservative, where it's like his entire political focus is, it makes me uncomfortable to know that another man is having gaping anal sex with another man, and it makes me uncomfortable. I don't know why.
Yeah, for sure. He has said a lot of like really homophobic things in the past. He's also God, there was something else kind of related to that too. Oh yeah, like there's this one thing that I think he said on the floor in a committee where he talked about how like, we like if the left wasn't like pro-abortion, maybe we wouldn't be like pro-cutting Social Security, because then we would have like a stronger working class of like subservient people, basically. Like, he didn't say the subservient part, but that was the main implication, right? Was that we just needed like, more worker bees, and because of abortion being legal, we don't have that, so we have to, force people to give birth in order to keep Social Security, which is just insane, right? Like, just like absolutely crazy that this is like a legitimate take that this guy has. And I mean, like, he's not alone, right? I mean, this isn't like, oh, he's like, this full of original thought or anything like that, right? This is, stuff that's, said by other right wingers. It's just like when it's the Speaker of the House saying it, it takes on a little bit more of a disturbing tone.
Are you familiar with Rod Dreher by any chance?
I don't think so.
Weird, like, Christofash style right wing pundit. I think, is he from Shreveport as well? Okay, he's from Baton Rouge. He's also from Louisiana and has the same like bizarre panics about gay people and like being forced to live in proximity with people, kind of shit. Mm-hmm. But he's like incredibly freaked out in all of his writing. He's like freaked out that Dina gay kind of shit.
And, it's just like I was gonna say, I think I've heard these things before. I didn't recognize the name, but this does sound about right.
Yeah, you've definitely encountered someone on Twitter making fun of him, or some podcast going through his writing and laughing. Chapo had a whole series on him, and like the kind of writing this stuff does is indicative of a certain kind of conservatives. We talked about them, I think, on one of the newer episodes I did on religion, right? The trad cath subculture, right? Where it's like this posturing and aesthetic of like piety and virtue and, terror about social degeneracy. But when you really unpack what they're saying, it seems to be like late erotic feelings, or like just a deep insecurity about themselves, or like just male area, right?
Yeah.
And Mike Johnson he really reads to me like the elected version of Rod Dreher, basically.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, he did, to his potential credit, did pass a budget in the House. Did the exact same thing McCarthy did, with, I think, an incredibly similar margin. So we'll see if he's actually long for the speakership after that, right? I mean, there's a possibility they might want to ditch this guy. We'll see. I mean, he might be able to placate them with some other like ridiculous demands. Of course, his first action as speaker was to attempt just raw Israel aid and nothing else. Because like Biden, when he's called for it, at least wants it packaged with Ukraine aid, with funding for the border wall and all that stuff. And they passed just straight Ukraine aid. And I'm very surprised that the continuing resolution didn't also include it. It's very weird that they didn't try to force that through. They did, of course, censure Rashida Tlaib, though, which again kind of circles back to Israel-Palestine. So Rashida, of course, is our only Palestinian member of Congress, or Palestinian-American member of Congress. So you can kind of see where their priorities are, I think, largely in frankly, culture war stuff, predominantly, right? I think that's really where it is.
Yeah, this definitely wasn't. I mean, this also happened concurrently, right? It's like, I think no one in the public eye speaking humanitarian issues in Gaza today, has been more even calmly measured and like increasingly like um giving the significant demanded respect the Israel lobby or like a certain type of like commentator is demanding of everybody, the way that everyone like wants your denunciation of Hamas before you even open your mouth, right? Like Rashida never said anything that you would consider controversial, defending terrorism or all of that shit.
The
She's been like,
I think the specific reason, I mean, so there was a couple things that they used as their official rationale, and I'm not endorsing these, clearly. Marjorie Taylor Greene first attempted to censure her with a resolution saying that she incited an insurrection because there were some pro-Palestinian protesters that were like outside the White House.
oh, like January 6th didn't happen. Okay.
Right. Well, I mean, that's their thing, right? Is like her, like Marjorie Taylor Greene especially, but some other members of her wing are essentially doing everything in their power to undermine like the definition of insurrection, right? They're just, if they just sort saying like all of these things are insurrections, then therefore you can't say January 6th was an insurrection, right? Or it just doesn't mean anything, right? It's like, oh yeah, like an insurrection. That's just, I think I saw one of those, on Black Friday at the local Walmart, right? That's sort of what they want to reduce it to. And I think she's the one who's really been working on doing that as much as possible. I don't think it's been successful, of course, but like that's like the objective there. But yes, obviously to anyone with like a brain, it's frustrating and, all of that, right? Disingenuous, shitty, you name it. The one that did pass, though, was because she had specifically on Twitter defended the saying "from the river to the sea." Which
oh my god, that has been the stupidest discourse in all.
Some people read it as like, well, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. So then, therefore, what's in the way of that? Well, Israel. So that means you have to get rid of Israel. However, this saying does mean different things to different people. And again, like her defending it, it wasn't like her defending that version of it, right? She wasn't saying, yes, I believe in the total destruction of Israel because X, Y, and Z. No, her approach was just, this saying is like this call for free, for freedom. That's all it is. She was, defending like the idea of the activism, not, the idea of like the destruction of Israel or anything else like that. So of course, not a good enough rationale for members of Congress, or at least some members, the majority.
The hysteria over that statement, especially by non-Jewish people, has been so frustrating. And it's like,
well, I mean, it's literally everything they like kind of criticize, and like obviously there's like kind of that like woke scold type on the left, but it's like it's everything that like the right criticizes like those people doing, right? Where it's like, oh, you're just like offended on the behalf of everyone else. This is precisely that, right?
Yeah, I kind of like, to what extent identity politics that we conceive of it now hasn't just become like a collection of ways to get people to shut up because you don't like them, instead of what it initially was, which was like a narrow social concept meant to be used in an academic context.
Mm-hmm.
I know me and you were talking about this, and like I wanted to express this sentiment, right, where it's like, anytime I've had a discussion with someone on the right, and this is why I don't believe in debating them, because you can really only have a debate with someone who wants to speak with you in good faith, right? Yeah. Is any of respect, goodwill, good faith, measured consideration or acknowledgement you give them never paid back to you. It's the kind of thing where it's like, and I'm not saying that this is an inherently bad thing, right? But it's like, why is it that every statement any of us makes has to be tempered with, I condemn Hamas, I condemn terrorism, I condemn violence, before we even get to say killing civilians? You get what I'm saying? Like, why is it that the request is always made to, or not even the request, the demand is made to us that we have to willfully tie our hands to our back before we can even or even like, you know, engage the discussion. But questioning any, you know, these people deserve death is considered a form of anti-Semitism. The way some of these people are acting, any right winger I've had a discussion with where it's not even on this subject alone, and they will take a mile in return. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, like, it extends well beyond just this subject, right? Where there is sort of those immediate like demands, and yet the idea that you could, like, I mean, I don't know if it's just that like you don't see it in the media, so it's just sort of treated as like, no, this just isn't something that's like legit or like fine. But like it comes to my mind, right, where like if we're concerned about, you know, our ideologies being associated with violence, well, I mean, look at all the domestic violence that occurs on behalf of right-wing ideology, right? We have, like, I mean, the vast majority of these like mass shooters are right-wing inspired and whatnot, and in some cases, right, they like directly tie their manifestos and their desires to specific conservative leaders or thought leaders or whatever you want to call them, right? They
Right.
like, oh, I watched this person's show. That's what made me want to, you know, kill all these gay people or kill, you know, the people here who are degenerates or whatever, you know, name your version of it. And the idea of like tying them to that is treated as bad faith, as you know, just, you know, like you can't do it, right? It's not allowed. Yet the inverse is always sort of assumed, right? You have to like, oh hey, like you are also, you know, critical of America, therefore you must love Osama bin Laden. Or hey, you think the Palestinians are good? Well, look at Hamas, like, and you know, you can't even begin to untangle the things, right? You can't like say, well, oh, okay, well, you know, Hamas doesn't represent the you know, Palestinian people because, you know, they weren't, you know, when they were elected, that was so many years ago. They said there would never be another election again. Half the people weren't even alive to vote for that. Like, you know what I mean? There's like a million, like a laundry list of things to unravel there, but you can't even begin to start with like that first point.
Exactly, and like that's why like the temptation to debate or like mince words with a right winger, like thing like people have to let go of. Delete the comment, block them, don't give them a voice, whatever it takes, right? Like if you're gonna debate somebody, you better hope you're in like Slavoj Zizek versus Jordan Peterson territory where, you know, they're willing to hang themselves with their own rope. I mean that metaphorically. You know,
and like I will say this, like I think that like some people that do engage with these debates, I think there's some value to it. Maybe some of it's admittedly more entertainment based. But I think, you know, to the extent that some people I think have used it to sort of help build a platform for like themselves and like left wing ideology more broadly. Because like let's face it, like I know a lot of people that complain about like platforming conservative voices and whatnot, but for the most part, a lot of those, you know, conservatives that people are so called worried about platforming, they have the bigger platform than us. Right. Well, specifically us, of course, but like then a lot of left wing people in general. So like, you know, people saying like, oh, you're platforming, I don't know, Jordan Peterson, right? Like more people know who Jordan Peterson is than almost any like left wing commentator, right? Like, I'd hardly
take it up with Joe Rogan for platforming him in the first place,
right?
You know?
Yeah, like and there's a difference between like, you know, I have this person on to debate them or at least attempt to debate them, right? I mean, as we said, there's a lot of reasons why in good faith that doesn't happen. But, you know, like there's a difference between that and like just, you know, the fucking what's his name? The former TYT guy who, you know, why I left the left. The gay guy.
Was it the Daily Wire guy? Is that who? I'm trying to remember.
No, it's
I know who you're talking about.
Dave Rubin.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, there's a difference between like that is like textbook. Like if you want to work, you're worried about platforming. That's it. right? Just bringing people on to talk about ideas and just, well, wow, oh wow, I never thought about that, or man, why doesn't the left consider this more? Like that's a huge difference. Like just accepting people uncritically, that is leagues different from like at least trying to engage with their nonsense, right? And yes, I don't think like you, I don't think it's that productive to engage with a lot of them, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
maybe the audience of that might get something out of it.
Yeah, I guess I can temper my initial take a little bit, right? Where it's like there's definitely people who are better at doing some of those.
Well, when you're
debates,
doing it
right?
interpersonally, right? I mean, that's different, anyways, right? Like, there's
Yeah,
not much value to be gained there if you're talking with like your racist uncle at Thanksgiving or whatever. Like, there's just nothing to accomplish there.
or even like randos on like your social media feed. There's really not much you can do there, right? But like, I think if it's the kind of thing where if you're going to debate someone on the right, you need to understand that their playbook is to try and set the rules of engagement more favorably towards them than winning of their own merits.
Right.
That has been my experience in that book, right? So, I mean, I don't know, like there's streamers who successfully like counter these guys, right? So it's like, yeah, you invite the guy on your stream, you set the rules, you kick the guy out when he's acting a fool, of course,
Mute him, whatever. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's like it's just one of those things where I think the strategy, if anything, and it's not even a strategy, it's more of like just a mental framework, I guess, right? Is like just stop accepting someone else's rules of engagement if you know it's not going to go anywhere. Because I think some of these people really just have more of a broader goal of making you feel like their worldview is more common or is the consensus, and make you feel crazy for thinking the way you do.
Well, and to be honest, too, I mean, I really have kind of more recently come to this sort of, I don't know if it's an epiphany or something, but like this belief that I really do feel like so much of just like the right's politics and like their brand is just how do we make people miserable? Not even necessarily in a material sense, so I mean that's certainly part of it, but just like how do we just like suck the joy out of life by just being like these like just these Scrooges about everything and
Exactly, just individualistic, materialistic to no
yeah.
fucking end. Yeah.
Yeah, like even when like their policies aren't even as materially focused, like on the culture war stuff, it's like okay, like yeah, like from a point of privilege, a lot of that culture war stuff doesn't necessarily directly affect me, but man, does like that discourse get to you at times? And it's like that's
Yeah.
kind of just like the dissent of this, right? There's just a certain utility in wanting to avert like that kind of level of like interpersonal misery, like how many people is it harder to like have these conversations with anyways, right? Like especially since Trump was elected, like it feels like it's the number that I feel like I can have like any like quote unquote civil debate with has gone down to virtually zero.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair, because like what they're and I know we're derailing the discussion, but I think it's good we did, right? Is they're trying to appeal to like people's most base and like petty instincts, right? That like
Yeah.
everyone's gonna fuck you over. There's no point cooperating. There's no better possible. Despite your best attempts, people will do you wrong. And then especially like with the advent of like the bullshit like alpha male bullshit they're trying to put out these days, like it is just like just do what you want, fuck people over in the process. Who cares?
Yeah, and maybe to some extent it's filling a void that maybe the left hasn't adequately realized how to address. But yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, how do you counter alienation in society? That remains to be the case, right? And
yeah,
I mean, more broadly, we've brought this up in past episodes, right? Where it's like the old forums for public interaction and like just being less miserable and like less lonely just aren't around in the ways they used to be. You could argue maybe because they don't make money or because they're not seen as productive by our market-driven worldview these days, right? But yeah. I think it just boils down to like the thing we've been saying for like the past year, I'd say, right? Where it's like they literally are a death cult. I'm not saying
Mhm.
that like in a dramatic way. I'm really just saying that like it's the most cynical, most pessimistic, most um hopeless of worldviews
Yeah, I agree.
that they want to present as like the rational and fair option. And then they'll dress it up with a mockery of Christian faith, or they'll dress it up in what they think is economic genius. I'm sorry, neoliberalism is not that. They'll mask it in this appeal to like Americana and like our civic religion, whatever the case might fucking be. It's monstrous. there's no words for it.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think maybe I don't need to be so pessimistic, because the culture war is not winning in the ways that it wants to. And I think we're seeing that play out in certain of we saw in our most recent bout of midterms.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a great transition into this.
So like again, like this was, no one saw this coming, but abortion and marijuana won the ballot in Ohio this year.
Yeah, big majorities for both of those. Kentucky, the Democratic governor won. And this was kind of after they were trying to, one of the things that the legislature had done in Kentucky was try to set him up with this anti-trans bill that he vetoed, in an effort to sort of like tie him to, the trans ideology or whatever they like to talk about. So like that's a clear failure of their whole like, culture war initiative again, right? Like, we've seen this lose election after election. Virginia, both houses also flipped. One of them might have already been Democratic, but Newsom, or not Newsom, Youngkin, Glenn Youngkin, has no pretty much his legislative agenda is killed, right? Like he has to deal with a Democratic legislature, and he was sort of this person that they were trying to like stealthily insert into the Republican presidential race, and I think that kind of killed those ambitions, at least in the short term.
R.I.P. Bozo.
Yeah, good riddance.
Yeah, I think some of the takeaways that I saw from certain Twitter pundits, Edgar Mentum mainly, right? He had a tweet. I don't know if I sent it to you or not, but was kind of like, the culture war resentment isn't taking on as well as the right would have hoped. And that, there was like a swing of minority support towards the Republican Party in past years, but they didn't manage to maintain those votes. They either, just tuned out or went back to the Democratic Party for whatever reason. On Chapo, they were covering some of this, and they called this effect the Dobbs dick down. But yeah, I think overall it's like, I think what they were banking on with the Dobbs decision is that, at the state level, they would reaffirm the ban on abortion. But as we're seeing, there is a preponderance of electoral efforts to resist that push, and organizers did turn out to make abortion rights available to the public, but then also the broad sentiment of the there seems to be like a broad sentiment against the rightward shift in the culture war. There seems to be people just like, even if they may not necessarily disagree with the right's position, or they may have less than progressive views themselves, there still seems to be like this like preponderant sentiment I see around where it's like, it's not for me, but I also don't like people making a big show about it. I've run into people like that in public lately, and I think it's playing out on an electoral level to some extent.
Well, I think it's just like it's gone to a weird point of just being like, kind of like people use like terminally online or like inside baseball. And I mean, we'll get into the debate later, which was the day after these elections. But like there was so much in that just felt like it was detached from what voters are talking about. And I think that's true of a lot of these culture war things. right? I don't think that these are issues that people are like, super invested in, like at large, right? I mean, some people definitely are to their detriment, but I think it's this weird focus that I think turns off a lot of voters, like you said. And the other thing too, I was thinking is like it's sort of showing this, I think, a real shift in the Republican Party too, where like a lot of these like I think you're seeing like an increasing divide between people who kind of like knew they were, if not necessarily on the wrong side, the less popular side of the culture war. Like people like Mitch McConnell and like Nikki Haley now as well, like people who are more strategic. I think they are really struggling with sort of like charting a course for their party, right? Because you have some of these other politicians in there. I'd say the majority of the party is delusional. Mike Pence, who dropped out but is still like making all these media appearances, is like, I refuse to believe that this country is like majority in favor of abortion or anything like that, right? Like a million polls to the contrary, and just refuses to just grapple with reality. And obviously he's sort of on the outs with the majority of the party in a lot of ways too. But I think that sentiment is something that a lot of them just buy, right? That they think that like they really are the silent majority, and it doesn't matter how much evidence they are presented to the contrary, they will continue to call themselves the silent majority.
Yeah, I think it's just like it's kind of proving how out of lockstep these guys are, and I think it's safe to say that there used to be this like at least in like the circles I was interacting in like liberal circles, right, where it's like you can't accuse someone of being disingenuous with their views. You can't accuse people of like their alleged sincerity of their views. Like if someone tells you they're pro-life, you can't interrogate why that might be, or you can't call bullshit on why someone might believe that. But what we're starting to see is like, with like just very recently in Michigan, right, with the way that like it was on the ballot and immediately like the pro-life side had kind of realized a little too late that they had convinced all the people they were going to convince. No one else was going to take their side on that stuff.
And yeah, like where you've been getting this kind of attack, not so much on the idea of legalizing abortion or keeping it legal, but the idea that like, well, they want too much abortion, right? They have to like say like, oh, they have to like rely on these like weird ways to do it, right? And even then, like a lot of the way they talk about abortion now is like they want, Trump is talking about how post-birth abortions are like this legitimate like position that the party had, that like Democrats and like the left has in general, or even up to birth abortions, which is just insane. But of course that's being covered by conservative outlets like it's a matter of fact.
Yeah, and like it's the kind of stuff that it's the inside baseball stuff, right? Where like the people who already believe this are already where they plan to be. And then even they were talking like when they polled people, they might consider themselves pro-life because they might feel socially obliged or socially expected to reply that way. But when like asked like, okay, what about in the case of blah, 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 you would find that they were actually like, in line with what we would call the pro-choice position, Yeah. So it just kind of goes to show that.
Well, and that's just a phenomenon in general. On almost every issue, most people identify more conservatively than they actually believe when it comes to most of their views.
And I think that's the bottom line, right? Where it's like, I feel like it would not be an exaggeration to call the entirety of the American right this kind of AstroTurf or Potemkin project, because it is a severe minority. I think the people who profess to align with it are more so being pitted in that direction, be based on an appeal to their, particular sensibilities. I'm not saying that, every American is inherently good and like, if only for like propaganda
Sure, yeah.
everyone would vote 100% Democrat. That's not exactly where I'm going with this, but like I think the vast majority of people would not find themselves being rabidly arch conservative if the rhetoric was kind of washed away, the culture war was kind of washed away, maybe political education was a little more simplified and made more widely available, I think they would find themselves being a little bit closer to what they consider the center. Granted, I don't know what that means in a broader sense, like, does that still make the majority of people, capitalists as opposed to, more left wing? I don't know. Does that mean people are direct opponents of the empire? I don't think it translates to that per se.
Yeah,
but
well, I mean, with the capitalist thing especially, I mean, that's so abstract. I don't even think people think of capitalism as capitalism, right? They just think of that as like just this is the rules of the world, right? I mean, I think
right.
I think if we like simmered that down into like are people like pro like regulations and stuff like that, then you might be able to get a little bit more findings like that, but not in not in the like, oh, like are they there's secret anti-capitalist in this country, right? I mean, like, I think most people are probably like anti-capitalist in the sense that they like hate their job and hate having to pay for things, but I don't think that necessarily translates into political outcomes.
Yeah, I think like what I'm trying to reach at here is like there is a way to maybe build consensus reality again, and there is a way to demystify the effects of the culture war and just how watered down our political language has gotten. Like, it seems like it's possible in ways that we didn't think were before. Granted, it's probably still like a long and arduous project ahead.
Yeah, 100%.
So I guess, from the midterms, maybe we can jump to the presidential primary. So this has been a specter that's also been looming in the background for the Democrats, right? I think that wasn't there a recent poll that Biden's viability? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so there was this poll, and that was kind of what made the midterm results so surprising as well, was that the poll showed that Biden had very low favorability in the public, was losing to Trump in some battleground states, and stuff like that. And like, there was a lot of questions. Was the poll like legit? Was it good? Things like that. But I think it scared a lot of people. Yet we still saw the results of those midterms, right? Those midterms still had very positive Democratic results, and there's a lot of debate now, right? Does a lot of people, dismiss early polling anyways for presidential elections. But, it's sort of like, is this just a unique Biden issue, right? Is this just, Joe Biden is disfavorable, whereas his party and their positions in general are favorable, or what, right? Yet I think the challenge has been, finding a potential successor, right? And Biden is like this kind of uniquely paradoxical presidential candidate where he, he's old, he's not super popular, and like his age is like the main issue people have with him, but like people generally like his politics. He's had very large successes in like presidential midterms and stuff like that are highly uncharacteristic of any president in the modern era. So like, there's some things that make him good. And I think the issue has been kind of like, well, there's no one that's like a clear, like set up or otherwise like decent like successor for him. And he has a few primary challengers, right? Marianne Williamson is still, I guess, hanging in there. I believe Dean Phillips just jumped in the race, but he's like challenging him from being like not a good enough capitalist, right? So like there's no interest, I think, in his candidacy. And then of course we have frankly the embarrassment of Cenk Uygur, TYT host, founder himself, running for president despite being born in Turkey. He is disqualified on there, and I'm actually
maybe I'm a little too conspiratorial on that, but I'm like, the fact that he's like trying to like set this precedent that he can run for president, I think is like dangerous, because like it would like let someone like Elon Musk run, who might be a lot more successful in his campaign and implement a lot more atrocious things. But maybe that's too much of a abstract concern to really stress over.
I mean, it only works if he gets far enough, right? So there is
Right.
that point to temper that. But remember, I think like this might have been an episode we did earlier this year where like we kind of wondered like, are one Booby Kennedy and Marianne Williamson trying to, are they trying to peddle this into like a media career later down the line? And I think in Cenk's case, this is more of like him trying to really restart his own media career, right? Like
it does seem to be like that. There's been a lot of reports on like just kind of TYT not doing as well, and I guess this might be the effort to sort of rebuild his media empire.
Yeah, because it's like you had Hasanabi like just break with them, go to Twitch. Anna Kasparian cannot seem to get her foot out of her mouth. Anyone else on the network, either, even Jimmy Dore was on that network.
Yeah, for a long time.
For a long time, jumped ship and is kind of doing better on his own, even though he's gotten way worse as a result of going independent, right? So, like, the TYT media conglomerate, empire, whatever you want to call it, has collapsed under its own weight. And, Cenk as the kind of, let's just make a new thing, get a lot of hype behind it, have it burn out, and do it all over again, because that's what he's been doing since the jump, whether it was TYT, whether it was Justice Democrats, whether it was Wolfpack, whatever brand of progressive project he was trying to do that week. They've all imploded, and I think this is just another example of that on his part. I really don't see it going anywhere. I don't even think anything.
No, I mean, like, I don't think they even plan on having debates still in the primary. I mean, maybe that could change. God, I mean, I feel like, if Cenk is the progressive voice in the race, I feel like he is just the worst possible representation for it on a national stage.
And something I really resent from Cenk, right, and even TYT in general, is like the way they decided to like take the anti-trans lane. And you see a lot of people do this, right, where it's like it's because the left is too focused on trans rights that we're losing. And I'm like, what the how is that even comparable?
Despite all of the evidence
focused on trans people. Like,
despite all evidence pointing to the opposite, right? Like, that's the thing. And like they keep arguing it from that perspective, and I just don't get it. And I mean, there is that element to it, of course, right? That like, yeah, I don't necessarily want like, this sort of, like I don't want that to become sort of like mainstreamed within like sort of the left. I don't think it will be. But like, just like, even like him on like the stuff that like we would nominally agree with him on, right? Just his temperament and everything. Like, people have asked me like how I would handle like a Democratic Trump, and I'm like, well, I mean, I just can't fathom that happening. But like, this is probably like the closest you'd get, right? Think of how many like clips you've seen of him just going like,
well, you know why he's like
wall
that.
And crazy.
He's literally a college Republican. That was his jump into.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is true.
I'm not even saying that like, as like an inside baseball thing. Like, every college Republican anyone has ever interacted has always been like that, bombastic, tries to be smart, tries to, again, set the rules of engagement on their own terms so it looks like they're winning. And I think that's the operative term: look like you're winning instead of winning. And Reagan played that strategy to his, success oftentimes, right?
Yeah.
But in Cenk's case, it's like, it's been 10 or so years of him doing that, and people have basically found newer ways to be entertained. And I think that's been like the biggest problem with this left media industrial complex. I don't even know if that's the right term. I say that jokingly, right? Is that, people come to this stuff wanting new insights and education, but they also like don't want to deal with the existing orthodoxy and like the kind of problematic shit they see in like mainstream circles. TYT might have been a place where people, went to at first because it was the only game in town, but everyone left as soon as things got better. Everyone went to podcasts, everyone went to their streamers, everyone went to better YouTube channels. I mean, for crying out loud, Sam Cedar does the same thing with his show, and it's like
just doesn't go nuts.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, exactly right. It's there's more competition for it, and like I don't know if this will give him any traction with that, right? I mean, I think that their issues are really tied to kind of I think their right wing pivot, like on trans issues and probably some other issues as well. They've gone on like this like strong like anti-homos kick too.
Yeah, because it's like the crime lane and like the anti-trans lane. I mean, to be completely frank, they probably, some pollsters saw some, pick me type of person say I used to be a Democrat, but because of trans people and because of the rising tide of crime allegedly, I decided to just become a member of the Nazi party. It's always that story. It's that same old song.
Yeah, and it feels dangerously, we're on like a copyrights are gonna have to like come in and see if like they've stolen this song, right? Like that's how close we're getting on it, and it is frustrating. And as I said, it's just like for me, I was just thinking like just imagine him like talking about like I don't know, like universal healthcare. I think we agree on that with him. And just like thinking about how he like talks with Biden about it, and he just goes nuts, like, "Oh, what did you just do? Something? What did you just pass it or whatever?" And then like Biden's just like, "Come on, man." And then it just like kills him, kills the idea just because he came across like a raving lunatic, like frothing at the mouth talking about this stuff. And Biden was like all cool and chill. And like, I'm like, this is not who I want to see, like challenging Biden from the left on these things. Cause he's not like capable of doing it in a like way that is relatable or would communicate things. I think that to like the broader public.
Yeah, it's like media doesn't always translate to politics, right? I think someone getting on mic and ranting might be cathartic, entertaining, or what you needed in this case. You needed it years ago. You don't really need it anymore. But do you need your elected officials to do that? As it turns out, the worst thing you can do is look insane in American politics, whether it's like the Howard Dean screen, Well, but even then, it's like he never comes off as like. I mean, if you listen closely, he's bumbling. But like, if you're just looking at Trump with lizard brain, he looks composed. He looks like he's winning. He's coolly dismissing people.
Yeah,
and of course,
like
if
it's like we know where the lizards are in this country ideologically. So it works in one field more than others.
But yeah, it's like like Trump's like whole thing is that he doesn't freak out on air.
That's true,
and that's why he like was able to get under DeSantis's skin is because like DeSantis is the kind of guy who does freak out on air, and that's why like the Trump aesthetic appeals to so many people, right? And I think it's like someone who gets easily worked up, someone who gets like easily hot and bothered. That's someone people enjoy making fun of.
Yeah.
Anyhow, for Bobby Kennedy to then drop out and also like run independent, that's interesting.
Yeah, and in like speaking of which, because he has noted, and a lot of people have noted that he probably takes more votes from Trump than he does Biden. And I did encounter someone at a family event where they were it sounded like a potentially Bobby Kennedy voter. Which would have been, again, someone who I think traditionally would have probably just voted Republican. So, I guess, that might be panning out. But I did find it interesting that DeSantis was trying to make the electability argument of him versus Trump, which has kind of eroded, right? Like, that was sort of his claim to fame before. But now it's like, well, Bob Kennedy takes less votes from me than he does Trump because I'm super, super anti-vax, whereas Trump's lukewarm on the issue. And it's like, this is insane. Like, what a shitty argument.
It's bad. And then it's confusing with like Cornel West too because he's still in the Green Party primary, but he renounced his Green Party membership, as I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he wasn't even running in their primary anymore at all, to be honest. I thought he was like, I'm not looking for their nomination. I'm just gonna go solo. And like his reasoning was basically that he like didn't want to have to like put the effort into like running a campaign, which like kind of raises questions about what he's doing in general.
I mean, it's just like I guess the fun thing is you can always be a crank. It's free. Anyone can do it. But
and you'll never be held to account, right?
Who's the other crank I sent you? What was his name? Oh my god. Every presidential candidate except me sucks Zionist cock. Yeah, Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, MIT PhD, the inventor of email. I don't even did he?
Is he actually running?
Yeah, he just seems to be another crank running for president. Let's see. Oh, this website is amazing, bro. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. Is he going to be on the national ballot? Is that what he's doing?
No idea.
Volunteer. Oh my god.
I like how there's like there's no positions. Anything on here, is there?
No, there's campaign gear, there's a style guide.
This is weird. This is like a money laundering front, right?
I don't know because it's like the thing about being a crank is you can do both. You can believe exactly what you want and launder money,
Yeah, but like what's he running on?
Oh, here we go. Here's the platform. Here's the platform. Okay.
Okay. All right.
That's it?
No way.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
It's just a blog. Okay. Innovation, how masks destroy health.
Oh boy.
The 3 types of intelligence. How noise pollution destroys health. How we solve real racism. Booby Kennedy and Elizabeth Warren are the real racists.
It is actually spelled Booby Kennedy. Wow.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah. Dude want to be Jimmy Hoffa so bad.
Is he like libertarian or I mean
I get the vibe he's libertarian.
That's what I get the vibe. I just don't know if he's running for their platform or not. But.
No, we would know if that was the case. I think he's running as independent. There you go.
Okay, well, there we go.
Oh my god. He called Vivek Ramaswamy Vivek the Snake, so I got to give him props for that. I got to give him just that much.
That name is like it's the most low-hanging fruit, yet, he's the first one to grab it.
I wrote 50,000 lines of code to replicate all features of the inter-office mail system that I named email. The system we use.
Wait, his inventor of email is something different?
Filed an application for copyright, certificate of registration to him on the program. Is that a fake Time article? Wait, what the hell?
Yeah, this is all fake. I think unless he did something specifically. God. I just looked up like email invention. It says 1971, and it says Ray Tomlinson, who is not in fact this dude. So I don't know if there's maybe one of the terms.
I thought it was ARPANET where like all this stuff started. I was confused.
It seems like his his claim to fame is that he created a name. Maybe, but it's not even like coming up on like the history of email.
Oh my god!
So this dude's amazing. Just like,
this guy's amazing. Oh my god! I love cranks. I love seeing cranks in action. Oh, okay. I wish him well. Oh my gosh. So I do have a question about like the Democratic primary.
Yeah.
I worded this question weird, but I'm just gonna read it verbatim. Is this the net result of putting Bernie in the DNC cuck chair / not having a steady supply of backbenchers or new blood?
Well, the thing is like I actually do think they have a decent number of like or maybe not so much backbenchers, but I think they've got like a string of candidates for like 2028. I just think that like 2024 was too soon for a lot of people. And like, you do have that weird issue of like you have the incumbent. Yes, he could have chosen not to run. I think it's too late to make that kind of call now. But I think that's sort of like the position that they've kind of put themselves in. As a result of that. But I think there's definitely like, I mean, I think you're going to have like, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, probably Pete Buttigieg again. I mean, there's going to be people who run in 2028, but I think it's just that like the timing of things right now is going to be, made it a little tougher to sort of create a field there.
Yeah.
Should we get into the lunatics now?
Let's get into that bin. And I just have to remind the listeners that I was not able to tune into that debate. I feel like I may have preserved some sanity by not engaging it. But hearing about, what people saw at this debate and the clips, I think this was really the one that killed brain cells, wasn't it?
I don't know. This one was a weird one where like I felt like the other two were a little bit more chaotic. This one just felt really boring. And it showed a little bit more consensus on certain things.
Okay.
And stuff like that. But I mean, like those aren't like good things to have consensus on. I mean, I'll just kind of look through the notes that I had shared here.
Like I think October 7th was still kind of fresh at that time, so they were really going hard on the Israel stuff from what you told me.
Yeah, so like the not as hard as I kind of expected in the sense that it was not as much time spent on it, but it was probably what you expected. It was pretty xenophobic and whatnot. Vivek kind of right out the gate. We've kind of joked that he has run as a different candidate in every debate. In this one, he just ran straight up as Donald Trump. He immediately says that like Ronna McDaniel is the problem with this party. That's why we're losers. This was right after the midterm elections, so he said that like he blames her for everything, and like why is like Lester Holt here as one of the moderators? This sucks. It's not a proper GOP debate. Really, just like off the rails on him, and that kind of continues going forward. Also said that the real moderators for this debate should be Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, and Elon Musk.
The most Reddit blue check guy to ever run. Oh my god.
100%. And he gets into a few fights with Haley later, including over TikTok. Which we'll get into.
I lost brain cells looking at that.
Tim Scott, relatively early on, I can't remember the exact context of this, but he was just talking about how like it's important for like the party to win and like policies don't really matter. And it's like, what do you mean they don't matter? Like the whole fucking point is that they matter, right? Like I don't know, just he's an idiot and he's dropped out now. But man, did he go out with a fucking whimper. Yeah. The Israel response, for the most part, they were very deranged, I thought, in a lot of cases. Tim Scott said that he wants to defund every university from college funding and deny visas due to Palestinian protests. So, like, if you have a protest on your campus, your federal funding's gone. If you have participated in a protest, you lose your visa. All this stuff, just really draconian stuff. DeSantis, of course, sort of echoed that. The person who had the most quote-unquote humane response was Vivek, when he said that he would tell Bibi that he's on his own. He can kill the terrorists on south of his border by himself with no U.S. aid, while he does the same here. So again, we were back on like, let's invade, let's go to war with Mexico, blah blah blah. He also called Nikki Haley. I'm assuming Nikki Haley, could have been Ron DeSantis, Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels. The giveaway that it would be Haley is that, her policies are definitely Dick Cheney's, which I didn't really think about before, but I was like, yeah, that explains why because for a long time, she's felt like a candidate out of time. Like she doesn't belong in this current field. Just because a lot of her views are just like kind of that classical neoconservative that I just don't think
Yeah,
flies anymore.
there aren't many neocons left. I mean, of course, some are still alive, but like,
Right.
how many
They're
are
gone, like-
left? Yeah.
I guess her. You know, that's kind of where we're at. But yeah, I mean, that's there's that. This wasn't at the debate, but another note about Haley was I did see this also the same day they did that Chinese coverage on Hannity's show. She was there, and she said if she becomes president, she will take us out of the Human Rights Council, not get back into the Paris Climate Agreement, and we would get out of the World Health Organization, and she would defund the UN as much as possible. This is from a former UN ambassador, so good stuff. Back on the debate for Israel stuff, Christie touted his monitoring of mosques post 9/11 in New Jersey as a model of what we should do now. Like
Jesus.
this horribly racist and unsuccessful policy. That's, you know,
horribly racist, just involved in like the worst excesses of federal power with like the entrapment and shit.
yeah.
Just oh my god.
And again,
I think he is like the localized neocon, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, that's true. He is too. He kind of tried to do this like elder statesman performance. I don't think it went particularly well for him. He did come across as elder, but I think that's about all he got out of it. Talking about the Palestinian protesters, Nikki Haley suggested that the KKK is getting a raw deal because she's like, if this was the KKK, people would be really angry, but people's fine with like these kids protesting on behalf of, you know, terrorists, right? The Palestinians were flattened to be completely terrorist throughout this entire debate, right?
Which has been like the most insidious rhetorical trick that's been used lately, and I think to hear a presidential candidate use that term.
Oh, you got to hear 5 if you watch this debate. Basically say that. So yeah, really awful stuff. Tim Scott also said, beyond Palestine, he believes that there's thousands of terrorist sleeper cells in the United States.
There we go with this
Venezuela and Honduras and like all these places. Just completely baffling. DeSantis was talking about making government cuts. That was one of the questions. And he said that it is ridiculous to pay government workers pensions, that it's a waste of taxpayer dollars. Which, I mean, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised that they're anti, you know, public service workers and stuff like that. But, geez. Hugh Hewitt was one of the moderators. There's your neocon.
That's true, yeah.
Literally looked like he was dragged right from a crypt. His first question is asking about the declining Navy, which there's minimal evidence for. And asked the candidates what specific ships they would build to rebuild the Navy and how would they arm them. I don't know who this question was for. I think it's for your grandpa who builds model ships in his free time. But
I'm
even
no better than grandpa, but shit, for real? Like that's what you're asking in a presidential debate? What the hell?
That would be like, if it'd probably be more relevant if I asked them, like, you know, what mobile suits are they going to build to rearm the Earth Federation? You know, that they basically be what it is. Like, just I don't know, baffling.
Simple answer, gun tank.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just build gun tanks. We need more gun tanks. That was his thing. Then he did ask about banning TikTok, which was kind of dumb. This has been like a weird talking point for a while. They sort of use this under the guise of like, well, like, you know, there's Chinese ownership of the app and like it's giving them valuable data, blah blah blah. But largely it's that like they want to openly hate kids as much as possible, right? I mean, I think that's just kind of where we're at this point, is that they hate the youth. They hate that young people keep voting against them and their interest. So they, want to screw them as much as possible. That being said, we then get into the fun part here where Vivek, who uses TikTok, right, to engage with the youth, because he's cringe. And he attacked Nikki Haley because he said that her own daughter uses TikTok, to which she replied that he's just human scum.
Keep my daughter's name out of your goddamn mouth, type of shit.
That would have made this way better if she did just, pull she should have just pulled that. They then debated Venezuela and how we need to put sanctions on them.
Who is asking for this? Who's asking?
I don't know. I mean,
did Juan Guaido call in the question? Is that what happened? Like,
I mean, I question if is some of this is this donor stuff? But I mean, surely they don't care about Venezuela, right? Maybe there's enough donors who lost some of their assets abroad in Venezuela and want revenge. I don't know.
Say what you want about Nicolas Maduro. He got his biggest hater to be his biggest customer.
That's true.
That is a Sigma billionaire mindset at work.
And that is weird too, right? Where it's there's we're accustomed now, but now we want to impose sanctions on them in this debate. And again, I don't know who you're trying to win over with this, right? I don't think a voter is gonna be oh man, Nikki Haley really knows what's up with Venezuela. That's my vote now. It's just baffling. She also attacked DeSantis because he banned fracking, and he specified it was specifically in the Everglades because that would be bad, which maybe highlights that it would potentially be bad in other places that are not the Everglades. But, I guess some good old NIMBY didn't hurt anyone electorally. So, yeah, that's her take. And she was still just really angry that he banned fracking. After that, they just kind of spouted nonsense that you would expect. Tim Scott dropped a few days later, basically in the middle of the night. I don't know why. I mean, obviously he stood no chance, but you'd think that I don't know, maybe we would want to announce it, when you could get some media attention for it, not Trey Gowdy's show.
Yeah.
But I'm glad he's gone. He was probably maybe my least favorite candidate in the field. He just everything it just strikes me as he's just the epitome of taking advantage of selling out himself for racism and stuff like that. I mean, as I said, that crazy line from the prior debate about the Great Society and welfare being worse for Black people than slavery and Jim Crow. It's just insane.
But then for him to then cry that I'm being discriminated against when it's time for him to drop out.
Right, yeah, he claims discrimination. He claims that, Democrats are racist because they don't like him or whatever, and it's just just shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of the Republican primary either, and it's even if we're not in an interregnum, the vibes of an interregnum plague the current moment politically. Where no one is interested in the spectacle of the president. It seems no one is interested in, or maybe the faith in a leader seems to be lost conceptually. There doesn't seem to be a lot of faith.
Maybe.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a lot of faith in the Democratic leadership as it currently stands, and even with the Republicans, right? They've gotten a lot more rabid. They've gotten a lot more deeper into the culture war, right? But, Trump, even as a looming specter, doesn't seem to have power the way he used to. He's still around, he's still making crazy statements and whatever. He's still got the rallies, but it's it feels less like he's there to run for something and a lot more like he's doing a tight five for a stand-up,
Or just trying to desperately just avoid criminal prosecution and whatnot, right? And
that too.
All of these court cases are not going well for him.
No, not at
that's
all.
pretty evident. There was that one, the New York case I think is going on right now, and there's that one story about how he ran from the courtroom abruptly, and I don't know if I believe it or not, just because there's I want a video of it, and we don't have one, and I don't know if there's a reason we don't or what, but I'm I don't know if I totally buy this was a real thing that happened or not. But
I think the usual explanation, and this is from one Antonin Scalia, is that this was his opposition to even having people do portraits in the Supreme Court is because, like, you know, people's private lives are put on display, like private moments in court are being put on display. And maybe you could argue, like, someone breaking down on the stand, do you want that captured and, like, disseminated? Maybe that's, like, a fair take to some extent, but, like, if things are as crazy as they get in courtrooms sometimes, don't you at least want that? Can like the courtroom sketch at least be released of that happening?
Do they like draw do they draw like speed lines to the rate that he like just booked it out of here?
Yeah, you know, if the courtroom sketches are getting released, can those, like, you know, I don't need like a full release. Just a little sketch will suffice, just so that we know what happened.
Yeah,
just a little doodle.
100%. Yeah, and I think, like, I mean, some of his rallies, like the performances are just sad, right? Where he just rambles on and like he talks about how he's running against Obama, and then like his advisors have to like defend this. He's like, oh well, like it's just a slight misspeaking because he knows that Obama's the one pulling the strings, right? And it's just so silly, like all of these things where it's just like he makes all these weird statements, and he always did, right? But it's gotten way worse.
Oh god, the newest rant where he's talking about, you know, President Xi, he's coming out of central casting.
Oh yeah, like where it's just like he was like talking up all these like, you know, strong men and whatnot, and like talking up Xi. Apparently didn't get the memo that like you know, your party considers him to be a foreign adversary,
right?
But you know. Talking about Xi, talking about Erdogan and all these other people, and like, I don't know, like it's like, I mean, like that's nothing new, right? I mean, like he's always kind of like had a soft spot for you know,
just anyone who's a strong man, yeah.
And I don't know, man, it's but just in general, just the way he rambles on, it's just, you know, like clear state of mental decline, but it's not framed that way in the media for whatever reason.
Rambling about like upholding Mao Zedong thought that was something that was not my Trump 2023 bingo.
Yeah, that was the weird thing, right? Where he was like, what was it that specifically because he did like evoke Mao.
Well, it was like specifically about like the opium, like he was talking about the opium wars.
Yeah,
and somehow like Mao Zedong like ended the entire, you know, century of humiliation by like allegedly running for president. Like that's the way the ramble went, you know?
Yeah. It's so weird where it's like the fact that you like, and like that, like, I mean, like praising Z is probably like, you know, bad enough, or Xi is probably bad enough for a lot of people. Going to Mao, like, man, like that's that's a whole nother bridge.
That is the weirdest invocation of Mao I've seen a Republican make. You know, that was interesting.
Usually,
it was interesting.
Yeah. Before he like changes MAGA to like, let's, you know, I don't know, like American Great Leap Forward.
Can you imagine Trump using the Maoist standard English?
Oh my god.
He calls him Vivek Ramaswamy with 3 Ks for Vivek. Can you imagine that?
Oh my god. That would be too much.
Nikki Haley with 3 Ks. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. Oh my god.
Oh my god. Chris Christie, and you got like the capitalized SS in every place it shows up. Oh,
I'm surprised he's never come up with a nickname for Chris Christie. He's just always like he's always just like he's a slob, whatnot. Like,
I mean, there's an easy fat joke in there for sure. I think Trump is really workshopping it. I think he's workshopping it.
I mean, but like everyone else is like, you know, Ron the Sanctimonious and like all that stuff. But like Christie, he hasn't had that, like, he hasn't, you know, gone on him too hard yet. And like he's a slob. Like you'd think, like, you know, I don't know, like Krispy Kreme or something, right? Like,
oh, Trump's got to have a classic one. He's got to have a classic one for that. I don't know. He could even say like, I hate this guy so much I don't even have a nickname for him.
Yeah, I mean, I remember there was like Asa Hutchinson. His nickname was just like some awful mispronunciation of his name.
Dear God.
And then it's like, why do you call him that? He's like, no, I don't know. He's weak. Like,
oh man, and that's the thing. It's just like the specter of Trump doesn't even. He gets invoked in like the weirdest things, but like, I'm gonna be very honest. I don't even know like if we're gonna have a president in 2024. That's been like my vibe lately. It's like, how do we know anyone's winning this election? Is there even gonna be one? I'm not saying that in like an apocalyptic way, but it's just kind of feeling like everyone's phoning it in already. Like, are we just gonna phone in 2024?
I don't know. I mean, it's weird, right? Because like as you said, like the specter of him feels like absent, but yet like he's like the front runner, like the undisputed front runner. And you're right; it still feels like just kind of like he's not particularly visible. And what does that tell you about these guys, right? If like when Trump is like barely in the headlines, and like these guys aren't able to like put a dent in anything. Like,
exactly.
That tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah. All in all, I think that's everything we missed since the last month we did.
Finally.
This. I think we're finally caught back up, and I don't know. The old Lenin quote I think stands true, where there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen, and it seems like there's been a lot of decades happening these past couple weeks. I feel aged. I definitely feel aged by them.
It's got to go. Water off an elephant's back, man. You can't let it get to you.
Oh my gosh, you can't. I mean, I don't know. That was the kind of thing I try to tell myself. Is like, you have lived to see man-made atrocities beyond your imagination. Will you stand and fight, or will you, die like a dog? That's the question.
Yeah. Die like a dog, that's like a Trump saying.
He died, folks. He died like a dog.
It's always, everything's like a dog with him.
Oh my God.
In a pejorative sense, too. It's like never good. It's like...
They never tell you, he was sleeping like a cat. They never really use that as pejorative.
No, it's just
very cat biased society we live in, folks. They don't tell you about that. All right. Josh, it was a pleasure to be coming back in the studio with you. I think again, we are on the long march towards 100 episodes. I hope we hit that target by the end of the year. Is there anything we missed, or any closing thoughts you got for the listeners here?
I've kind of exhausted everything that I've been thinking of with this episode, so I can't say that I do.
All right. Well, as always, I will include the links to the show's social media and other links in the description below. Till the next episode, everyone, stay safe. Stay strong. Do your best. With that, I'll let everyone go. Take care.